Okay, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Brilliant. So 3 or 4 weeks ago, Ed, I think, announced Linking Lives, and it's a new initiative that we're going to be partnering with as part of the church. So I really wanted to preach into that this morning, give you an idea much more of what it entails, and how you can get involved is the important thing. So I don't know about you, but I'm sure that there's many of you here that will have experienced loneliness at some point in your life. And actually probably, although I'm sure, not just probably, that's probably a reality now. It's not in God's design for mankind to live alone and separate from others. And as Christians, you might say, well, we're never alone. We've always got God in the form of the Holy Spirit with us at all times. And that may well be. But right at the start of creation, even though Adam physically walked with God, God recognized that he shouldn't be alone. Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 reads, "The Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make a suitable helper for him." So it's clear from the very beginning of the Bible that loneliness and isolation were not in God's design or plan. Now, Jesus consistently noticed those who were overlooked: the widow, the outsider, the poor, and the marginalised. So as I've said, it was announced last month that Lynn's going to be heading up in Kendal this new nationwide initiative called Linking Lives. And this morning I want to talk about why as a church we feel it's important to get involved. What is the need? How as individuals we can be part of it. What does it entail? So loneliness is a state of mind. It's a disconnection from people, life, and it's devoid of purpose. It's debilitating and devaluing. Recent research has revealed that isolation epidemic throughout the UK. 29% of the British population are claiming that they feel lonely often or much of the time. And this is a bit of a mouthful. Loneliness is the distressing subjective experience of a discrepancy between one's desired and actual social relationship. Well, that's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But it's not merely about being alone. It's a feeling of isolation. It's a disconnection. It's a lack of companionship. And that can even happen when we're surrounded by others. It's an emotional response to perceived social inadequacy. UK government statistics also state that experiencing loneliness can increase your chances of premature death by up to 27%. That's massive, isn't it? So in comparison, although twice as many people in the UK contracted COVID-19, so that's about 2/3 of us, the percentage of those who died was only 1%. So if there's 71% who don't suffer from loneliness, so that's 2/3, 1/3, reached out to that 29% who do, it would make a huge difference. So if around half of you in this room, what's that, probably 60 people, reached out to a lonely person, that would help remove 60 other people from loneliness. Now that's massive, the effect that that can have. For those of you that have been in church for some years, you've probably heard several times as referencing a prophecy that we had pre-COVID. And that prophecy was around lifeboats. As a church, we were to be lifeboats in and around the communities of Kendal and the surrounding areas. The lifeboats were to go out in stormy seas and rescue those who were struggling. The hungry, the homeless, the poor, the marginalised, the outcasts, the addicts, the lonely, the depressed, the vulnerable, the needy, and lots more. Those lifeboats were to be well equipped, staffed, a refuge of hope and peace, safe and cared for until people could then be returned back onto firm ground. There was also other prophetic words about hoisting the sails and catching the wind. And we heard this morning one of the songs, "Be the wind in my sails." That's what we should do. And as a church, we were to go off the map. I think we probably did that during COVID, but we're to continue doing that. And over the years, we've had several manned lifeboats, especially with the food bank. And the food bank's done a wonderful job within Kendal and helping to bring hope to the hungry and provide food during a time of real hardship and allowing clients to get back onto a firm footing, back onto safe ground. The food bank has been, though, really the only equipped lifeboat that's gone out into the real rough seas of this town from this church. There's been others, like coffee mornings, film nights, pizza nights, walking groups, and they've all gone out, but maybe not quite so far and into quite such rough seas as the food bank has. But over the last 12 months or so, new lifeboats have begun to be launched and have really hoisted up their sails. The mum and toddler group started at the beginning of last year and has been growing at such a fast pace it's oversubscribed now. It's been serving mums and toddlers that would otherwise struggle to get out and build relationships. The warm space as well has been a wonderful place at building friendships and a safe place to chat and share lives. Both of these have become a channel for invitations into other church-based activities like the carol service or the Shakespeare pizza night. And we've seen 4 people taking part in Alpha because of those lifeboats. As a leadership team, we believe that the next lifeboat to be launched is King's Kendal Linking Lives. It's building on the work of the food bank, working with the agencies that we already have relationship with. We can look to help and eradicate some of the loneliness within the town of Kendal and the surrounding area. So this is a quote from a Kendal social prescriber. Currently there is a vast unmet need in the town of Kendal. A high proportion of our adult referrals are for individuals struggling with feelings of isolation for various reasons and the impact that this has on both mental and physical health. Loneliness is widely recognised as a public health concern linked to anxiety, depression and even physical health issues. It's well known to have the same impact on health as smoking. Reducing isolation or developing feelings of belonging is vital in fostering positive mental well-being and social inclusion. So back in October or November, can't remember just when it was, Ed and Lynn and Jane and I were able to travel to Derby for the Jubilee Plus conference. There we heard how churches from around the country were impacting their communities and bringing change to the lives of those in poverty. We, as King's Church Kendal, are part of the Jubilee Plus network of churches, and believe that local churches and individual Christians should be mercy bringers in their local communities, especially to those who are trapped in poverty or by injustice. Our vision goes beyond seeing individual lives changed, as important as that is, to seeing people raised up out of poverty and empowered to lift others out too. Our conviction is that when churches play their part in alleviating poverty and injustice around them, entire communities and neighbourhoods can be strengthened so that our society is healthier. Now, at the conference, we heard from Natalie Williams, who heads up Jubilee Plus. She's written many books and spoken in many churches on how the church should respond to social needs in their communities. She's massively influencing and helping churches understand the biblical calling that is on them to prioritise the needs of those in their communities. She shared how she heard God speak to her about how important it was to individually make a difference to another's life. And that when she has to stand before God at the end of her days, it would not be the big achievements in leadership and in leading Jubilee Plus, but the small differences that she'd been able to make to one or two people. Taking that on board, she decided to volunteer for a local charity that pairs a teenager with an adult role model one-on-one. She got paired with a girl that was a real challenge. That girl didn't want to be in the scheme, and she found it incredibly hard and challenging, and she thought she was actually just wasting her time. But little by little, a friendship has developed that is beginning to make a difference into that young girl's life. So it struck Natalie that when she has to stand before God, that it's not going to be that leadership of Jubilee Plus, but it will be the difference that she can make to people like that girl. And that it will be that point that God says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." 1 John 3 verse 18 reads, "Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." When befriending someone, we can't solve their lives, but we walk alongside them faithfully and listen to them and support them. So let's look at Luke 10. So I'll put it up on the slide. Verses 25 to 37, a familiar passage out the Good Samaritan. On one occasion, an expert of the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" As he answered in love, "The Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." He wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbour?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. He stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away. Excuse me. Leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road. When he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite. When he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he travelled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Which one of these 3 do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." So in the parable of the Good Samaritan, we see 4 different individuals or characters, and it's likely that we'll identify with one or more of those individuals. Firstly, we have the expert in the law. So this is the Jewish law of the Old Testament, often referred to as the law of Moses, or the Pentateuch, if I pronounced it right, which is the first 5 books of the Bible written by Moses. The experts in the law knew these books inside out and were often looking at ways to catch Jesus out. Jesus told the story that features a traveller going about his business. There's 2 upstanding members of the Jewish community and 1 despised foreigner. Firstly, the traveller who was going from Jerusalem to Jericho, which when I looked up on Google Maps, says it takes 8 hours 54 minutes on foot across quite hilly and arid countryside with up to 40 degrees heat in the summer. So not an easy walk, I wouldn't suggest. The traveller was attacked by robbers, beaten, stripped, and left by the side of the road. Now in those conditions, I would suggest he probably didn't have very long and wouldn't survive. So next along the road was the priest. He, like the expert of the law, who originally asked the question to Jesus, would have known the Mosaic law very well. He would have known what it says in Exodus 34, verses 6 and 7. The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness. He knew what he should have done for the poor man at the roadside, yet he chose to ignore him and passed by on the other side. Next came the Levite, a man from the tribe of Levi set apart to serve God and assist the priests. He again would have known what the Mosaic law expected of him, but he too ignored what he'd been taught and chose to pretend that the poor man wasn't there and he passed by also on the other side. So next up comes the Samaritan. Now he's from a group of people that the Jews despise. The Jews considered the Samaritans to be of impure bloodlines and looked down on them with disdain as a group of inferior people. Yet it was only this man who displayed the command to love your neighbour as yourself. He had pity on this traveller. He cleaned him up and bandaged his wounds. He refreshed him and put him on his donkey. Now I did check, but Google Maps doesn't have a time for how to get from A to B on a donkey. But donkeys don't really go much faster than a person can walk. So it wasn't going to delay him particularly. However, on that terrain and in that heat, it would have made it a very uncomfortable trip for the Samaritan now, because he's put this guy on his donkey and he's going to have to walk himself. So in taking the man to the inn to carry on his rehabilitation, he went out of his way to show compassion and give of his time and resources and experience a degree of discomfort himself. When leaving the man in the inn, he went even further, stating that he would take care of all the other costs that the innkeeper would incur. Now, the Samaritans also had the Mosaic law, so he would have known how, under God's law, he should have treated the robbed and beaten traveller. The difference that we see here is not only did he know how he should treat him, but he did also treat him the way of God's desire. He was the only one in this passage that treated his neighbour as himself. He lived out the knowledge that he had learned. The other two knew what they should have done, but to them, they were just a bunch of rules that they chose to ignore. For the Samaritan, it wasn't a bunch of rules, but a part of God's character that was written on his heart, not just in his mind. The challenge for us is, how do we respond when we see people in need? Do we look the other way, pretending we haven't seen them? Or we might say, sorry, I have nothing to give or help you with. Or we might say, sorry, I'm a bit busy. Do we think maybe that someone else will help them? Now, I'm sure these are probably all the same excuses that the priest and the Levite would have come up with at the time. They could have given the traveller some money or offered to pray with him, perhaps. And yes, that might have shown some compassion if they'd done that, but that wasn't actually what was needed right there and right then. What was needed was practical help to get him out of the situation that he was stuck in, otherwise he would have died. Now that's real compassion. Now you may well have heard the story about a man caught up in a flood, but I'm going to tell it anyway. There once was a man who lived in a small town. One day heavy rains came and the river began to rise, and soon the streets were flooded and the water started filling his home. As the water reached his knees, a neighbour paddled by in the canoe, and he shouted, "Quick, get in, I'll take you to safety." The man shook his head and said, "No, thanks, I have faith in God, he will save me." The neighbour pleaded, but the man refused, and the water kept rising, and soon it reached the second floor. The man climbed onto his roof. A rescue team came by in a motorboat and called out, "Sir, this is your last chance to get in the boat." Again the man replied, "No, thank you, God will save me." The rescuers, seeing no choice, left. The rain continued and the water rose even higher. The man climbed up to the chimney and a helicopter appeared overhead, lowering a rope ladder. A voice shouted through a megaphone, "Grab the ladder, we will lift you up." But the man called, "No, I'm trusting God will save me." Finally, the water swallowed the house and the man drowned. When in heaven, the man asked God, "Lord, I had faith in you, why didn't you save me?" God replied, "Save you? I sent a canoe, a boat, and a helicopter. What more were you waiting for?" Now that's a great story, and it really makes you think about how God works through other people to bring real practical relief from difficult circumstances. He sent a man in a canoe, the rescue boat, and the helicopter. God equips and will use us to save those drowning in loneliness. So I want to use that same story, but turn it completely on its head. I want you to imagine that you are now one of the three people: the neighbour with the canoe, the person with a boat, or the person with a helicopter. You've seen the man at his house and the flood rising, and you can see as this gets worse that he could eventually die. You have the canoe, boat, or helicopter that's been provided to you from God, and you know God's command to love your neighbour as yourself. What are you going to do? You might be this man's only hope. Will you pretend that you haven't noticed him? Would you perhaps think that, well, I've got a canoe, somebody else has got a boat or a helicopter, they'll go get him, I don't need to worry. Maybe you'll shout at him and tell him you're going to be praying for him and carry on. Will you be like the priest or the Levite in the passage, who had the command to love their neighbour written in their heads? Or would you like to be like the Samaritan and use what God has given you, with a love for your neighbour written not in your head, but in your heart? At the point when I must stand before God, I know which one I'd rather be. In our society today, we could easily replace the men in need from either story with someone who is suffering in silence from chronic loneliness. God has written love for those in need across our hearts. He's given us the tools to help, whether that be bandages, oil, wine and a donkey, or a canoe, a boat, or a helicopter. We've all been given God's love and compassion, and at least one tool that can be used to help people. Linking lives is the outworking of that command to love our neighbours as ourselves. So what does linking lives involve? It's about half an hour per week to talk to someone on the phone, or an hour or two a week to meet someone in their own home. Now, it might be that you struggle for time, but half an hour per week out of 160 hours isn't actually very much, is it? Did you know that the average, and I couldn't believe this, the average person spends 2.5 hours a day on social media? I'm sure that time could be put to much better use, couldn't it? Half an hour a week to talk to someone would bring that down to, well, I don't know how many hours, 2.5 hours per week, that's 18 hours a week, is it? So talking on social media. So half an hour per week would take that down to 17.5 hours, which could probably be reduced a lot more with much better things. The half an hour on the phone, or 1 to 2 hours in somebody's home, is an opportunity to listen. It gives them something to look forward to. It can help them feel valued, cared for, and not forgotten. The difference your time can have will literally save lives. There will be training given through the Linking Lives UK, and that will help with conversation starters, ideas of how to spend the time, games, books, interests, etc. It will take 6 to 12 months of commitment of your regular time, but this is a perfect opportunity for the church to engage with and invest in people in our community that will really make a difference. It's accessible to everyone, to all of us. It isn't time sensitive. You can do this in an evening after work. You could do it in the morning before work, or you could do it on the weekend. Having looked through the story of the Good Samaritan, what would Jesus do? At this point, I want to be very clear. We as a church are not partnering with Linking Lives as a means to go into people's houses and preach to them. We join in so that we may bring practical relief from loneliness, just as we do already with the food bank in bringing relief from hunger. We build relationships and we gain trust, and through that may well allow you to invite a person to other church events, like the Warm Space, like the Mums and Toddlers, film nights, coffee mornings, church walks, men's breakfast and pizza nights. And then maybe beyond that, things like the carol service or cafe church, just as we would do with any other friend that we have. Bringing that practical relief is exactly what the Good Samaritan did in the story that we've read, the parable that we've read. And that, at the time, was the most pressing thing, wasn't it? Was to bring immediate, practical help. And we don't hear the rest of the story in the parable, do we? But I'm very sure that when the beaten man had recovered, he'd have been extremely grateful to the Samaritan. And he would have asked him all kinds of questions as to why he helped and the others didn't. Then and only then is the opportunity to share why you care so much. Over the last 18 months or so, we've had a young lady that's come to our farm, who really struggled to get out of her house. She couldn't manage the education system, so she'd come once a week with a support worker and take out our dogs and play with them for a couple of hours. Jane and Hannah have built a great friendship with her over the time, and she's gained a huge amount of confidence and gradually come to the farm more. She's helped in our gift shop, and then she's helped in the cafe, and particularly in the kitchen. She's really excelled. She also comes round some evenings and does craft with Jane and Hannah, or just hangs out. She's been coming to pizza nights, and she's been helping Isaac learn to play the drums. So it's amazing to see the effect that putting some time and care and love into someone who really needed it can have. Yes, it's been tough at times and there's been many ups and downs, but because of putting time into her and building trust and relationship, she's now taking part in Alpha and thoroughly enjoying it. Linking lives is something that we can all get involved in. If each one of us was to help one person, there's 100, 120 people here this morning, then 100 to 120 people in Kendal can be helped out of loneliness, and 100 or 120 saved from drowning in the flood. That 100, 120 people who are beaten, bruised, and left by the side of the road, restored and recovered. We all now have a choice. Out of this parable of the Good Samaritan, who will we be? The priest, the Levite, or the Good Samaritan? Will we walk on the other side of the road, or will we step across and help? Now, Lynn's here this morning. Give us a wave, Lynn, for those of you who don't know Lynn. Lynn has a pen and paper and is looking to get people signed up today. There is a procedure around who can help in the scheme so that the safety of both volunteer and client is maintained. There'll also be some training and ongoing support for all volunteers. Now, there is a need for all ages of volunteers. As contrary to perception, it's not only the aged that suffer from loneliness, but the young, and they're actually more prone to loneliness in today's society. So please go and see Lynn, get some more info, and let's together make a difference to loneliness in Kendal.